Good morning, YouTube. I hope everybody's having a great day. I know it's Tuesday, but man, it's my Monday. I always have to work Tuesday through Saturday, so yeah. Anyway, man, let's get into this shit today. So we're just gonna talk. It ain't really enclosure type, but it kind of is, because there's one subwoofer setup that doesn't really have an enclosure per se, and we'll start with that one. That is Infinite Baffle. A Infinite Baffle setup, a really good example of where it would work best is a car with a small trunk. And you would basically remove the back part of the back seat that you lean up against, and you would go behind there and you'd kind of like put a board across there with everything closed off, and you'd find subwoofers that are made for an Infinite Baffle setup. I know that FI, they're one of the only companies I know that still really offer these, but you would just mount them to that board and that's it. You wouldn't really have a box or an enclosure. They kind of work with what little space you have in the trunk. And some of them sound really good like that. But that is actually your Infinite Baffle, because you just kind of have a baffle and no enclosure. Now, next we're going to get into cars that have very little space in them, and you want to cram some subwoofers in there. And the smallest enclosure type that you can possibly run is a sealed enclosure. Just regular old sealed. You know, normally a lot of times they'll take almost half of what a good ported enclosure would take. But there are some subs out there that don't work in a sealed enclosure. They only want ported or vented. Is what a lot of your paperwork will say. So that kind of covers that, you know. I'm not going to get into like all the strategics and everything of how they work. Myself, I think sealed enclosures sound really good. They're definitely not very efficient. You know, you get way more efficiency with a vented or ported enclosure, but in tight areas, or for people that don't really know how to build a ported enclosure, but can kind of calculate some airspace, they can throw down and build a good sealed enclosure and they'll sound good. Some of them get a little loud, but they do have good sound quality if done right. Now, we gotta move on to the next one, which would be your regular old ported enclosure. And these have been tried and true. They've been around for years. You can get pretty nasty numbers out of them. I mean, and there's 10,000 ways, and everybody has their own way to kind of calculate and port size and everything. And you get decent bandwidth out of them. I mean, that's probably the most common enclosure out there to date is your regular ported, because everything from like slot port, round port, octaport, damn near even a TLine enclosure falls in this category, you know, which a TLine enclosure is where you have the sub itself in very little airspace, and you have a port longer than this Jeep, you know. They work really good, but we're not even going to get into that, but that would kind of fall into your regular ported category. Then we're going to get in, you know, we're going to go with wall, because there are a lot of wall builds that have like a flat wall where it's just from top to bottom with subs like here, you know. Those still ported enclosures, guys. If the sub's there, you got to pour it over here or up here, whatever. It still falls in ported enclosure. They just build it into a wall. Now, we'll go ahead and jump into the Bandpasses. Now, Bandpasses are a little different, and especially the fourth order. Now, by rule of thumb, a ported enclosure would fall in the category of fourth order. But the fourth order that most people are commonly seeing are laid out like this. But instead of that port right there, yeah, that port, that whole bottom chamber would be sealed. So if this bottom chamber is sealed and you have your subwoofers fired, if your subwoofers are in the sealed chamber, and you still have a top chamber up here that's ported, that is what we commonly refer to as a fourth order. And fourth orders can be nasty. And how they work is you kind of tune that lower sealed chamber where you play some good lows and the subs play it. And you got a bigger chamber up here, and this is the magic of the Bandpass enclosure. This bigger chamber kind of amplifies what's coming out of the subwoofers from the sealed side, and you have a little higher tuning with your front ports. And they work really well. They can get nasty, they can get windy, they can have pretty decent bandwidth. And then the next is going to bring us up to my personal favorite, voila, a sixth order. The only difference between a fourth order and a sixth order is instead of having a rear sealed chamber, we have a rear ported chamber. And generally on a good sixth order design, your rear chamber will be smaller and it's going to be tuned really low. We're talking anywhere from like 20 to 26 hertz. It's going to be ideal. That ported chamber is going to fire into the top chamber, which is going to be bigger, or it should be bigger. It's going to help amplify that. And then we have a real high ported front chamber. So your front port would be tuned, let's say 50 hertz. So you get really, really good bandwidth. If it's built right, you'll have two peaks on the meter. You're going to have a low peak coming from that and a higher peak coming from this. So that's going to kind of cover those. There are other things out there like a folded horn design, which I'm not even sure myself how that works. I know Matt Kimball built a lot of them. He built the Trailblazer that Kerry Stahl is currently doing like 166s with 415s. That thing's nasty loud. And I don't, really know how. It's kind of along the TLine with a really long port. It's a folded horn design, so it kind of curves up. I don't know. It's magic. I mean, Matt Kimball had one of those in his little car too, and it did really good numbers. Demoed really well. But anyway, how the fourth order and sixth order, the benefit of them. And I see a lot of people just kind of skip tuning the front. Like they'll have the rear section done. They'll leave this whole top section wide open with no port on it. They could actually probably gain quite a bit by tuning the front. But everybody, in the beginning, when I did all the research on how to build a sixth order, the magic ratio is a 2-to-1. Now, these designs that we most commonly use, they come from like pro audio. Your big like concert auditorium equipment. Fourth order's commonly used in that. Sixth order's commonly used in that. A lot of guys that take home audio very, very, very seriously will have like their enclosures will be sixth order or fourth order, just because especially the sixth order has such a high bandwidth. Most of these things play from like 10, 12 hertz all the way up to 60. And they do it well. But how they work in itself, the best way I found to explain how they work is you take your iPhone or your phone, put it on speaker, play music, and grab you a little cup and stick the phone in there, and it's going to get louder. That's kind of how a Bandpass works. Well, if you get a little bit bigger cup and put it in there, it's going to get even louder. And, your music is coming from a source, whether it be a sealed chamber or a smaller ported chamber. And then it goes into a bigger chamber, which would be acting as the cup. And it's going to amplify that sound. And that's really how a Bandpass enclosure works. That's why your big chamber is so important. And I know a lot of guys just, they'll build this flat baffle here and they'll stick like 2012s on that motherfucker, and you know, they've got way more cubic foot down in this area than they do up there, and they're not really getting a lot of the benefit of it. It's just easier to fit all those subwoofers on a flat panel going back than it is a little, you know, up and down wall. So they're really just, it can be considered a fourth order, kind of. They're not reaping the real benefit. They're just getting a shit ton of subwoofers in there on a shit ton of power. And by having, you know, the small section up here, it does just shove everything forward. So I see how it works, but to truly do a good fourth or sixth order, you really try to stay in that 1.1 to 2 to 1, I mean 1.5 to 1, 1.2 to 1 ratio. And then another really good example, and this is an old design, nobody recently has come up with this shit, because the dude that taught me most of what I know about car radio, a guy named Joe Klein, back in like 2006, he built an old Chevy panel, like sedan delivery truck. It was like a 50s model, I think. He built it for a guy named Danny Hayes. And it had two 15s in it, in the very back, in a very small box. And it had a huge area. Like, you know, you'd look in the port, which was on the driver's side, and it was just a huge, big, empty space with two little 15s in a box back in the corner. I didn't even understand how it worked. But we're on back 2006. This sumbitch was still burping 73s, you know. Come to find out, you know, that was early. That was one of the earliest fourth order designs I'd ever saw. And, you know, like Clipo's another prime example. For you that watched Derek Haddock from Sundown Audio with the little pink blazer, he's another prime example. You know, huge chamber, very small enclosure with subs in it. And like I was saying, the subwoofers make noise. That big empty chamber amplifies that noise dramatically. And, you know, that's the proof right there, because hell, Derek even got louder when he had 4 18s, took 2 out, got way louder. So it's kind of how it works. Yeah, because the big chamber, like this would be the big chamber, that does definitely expand, and you know, like I said, the whole phone in the cup thing. The bigger the chamber, to a point, it'll keep getting louder. Like you can put your phone in a small bucket, it might get even louder, but once you stick it in like a 10-gallon bucket, it's just not going to work anymore, because it's just too much area. But hopefully this helps some of you guys, or I'm not even trying to help you. I'm just trying to help you understand how different enclosure types work. You know, they're from infinite baffle, sealed, ported, then you jump into, you know, your fourth order, sixth order. Oh, there's some guys that add another chamber that's even bigger that this would fire into. They'd have another chamber here and it'd be an eighth order. Don't really see a lot of benefit of that, but because, you know, the fourth and sixth are tried and true. But anyway, that's the video for today. Peace out, guys, and as always, bass on.